journey to discovering who they are, and while going through the process of huge physical and emotional changes, teenagers inevitably put their parents through their paces. I have with me in studio Joanne Fedler, all the way from Australia, to chat about her fabulous new book, Love in the Time of Contempt. It's a book written from a parent's perspective, how it feels to be the parent, and the mother in particular, of someone sprouting hair, zits and attitude all over the place. Welcome, Joanne. It's wonderful to have you here. I feel like I've lived the weekend with you reading this book. It's well thumbed. It's got little coloured bits and stars all over the place. It's an absolutely awesome book. I love it.
Thank you so much. I love to hear that. Thanks, Nikki.
It just really echoes my parenting philosophy that it's not all about the child. It's as much about us as it is about our children, and as much about our journey inwards as it is their journey to finding themselves. And I think you've just encapsulated that just so brilliantly.
Thank you.
So, Joanne, parents of teens often feel a sense of rejection. We've spent their childhood being everything to them, and suddenly they push us away. And it's a really awful feeling, because I know I've got two teenagers and so have you. So how do we need to rethink our role as their parents in the teenage years?
I think we actually have to realise that we need to be grown up about this whole change.
So we're still the adult?
We are the only adult in the room. And that's the important thing to remember, because teenagers can look like adults. They're these optical illusions. They sometimes even act a little bit like adults. They can be taller than us, bigger than us, but we're actually the only adult in the room. So even though you might feel rejected, it's a really good opportunity to look at what it means to allow somebody to become who they are, not who you want them to be.
And the funny thing is that they actually still need us, but they need us in a very different way.
That's exactly the point, and that's what I realised while I was raising my teenagers, is that the way that they needed me had changed, and therefore I had to change the way I was parenting them. My identity was changing the same way as their identity was changing, and I just had to learn to not be at the forefront, just sort of stand back, allow them to take the step into the world they needed to, but at the same time not to disappear from their lives, because I think parents do one of two things. They either hover too much and try to control their teenagers, or they disconnect. And I think both of those are very unhelpful.
I agree with you. And you said it quite beautifully in the book that you need to go from being in the foreground to being in the background. And I often say to parents, we spend their childhood walking in front of them or next to them. And in their teenage years, we have to start increasingly walking behind them.
Absolutely.
And we still need to be there to catch them if they fall.
Absolutely.
But talk to us about not racing in too quickly to save them.
Well, this is, this book really is a conversation with myself, because I'm trying to remind myself of all the things that I keep forgetting. And so my husband keeps telling me there's no S in mother. In other words, don't smother the kids, right? Stop helicoptering them. And I think that there is such a clear line between allowing your children to take risks, go out into the world, and letting them know that you have their back, but not stopping them from taking risks before anything's happened, not preempting things that they want to try and do. Because what we realise, I think, when we have children who become teenagers, is that we don't control them. And if we still think that we control them, then we miss the opportunity to stay connected to them and allow them to develop their own architecture of spirit that they need for themselves to be robust, to be independent of us.
And I love the way you put it, that we need to be the speed bumps, not the roadblocks in their lives. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, I think, we don't want to be putting obstacles in front of our kids and becoming mean and over-controlling, because we're so afraid of the dangers out there. But what we do want to try and do is to slow things down for them, and I think to bring them out of that cyber world into the real world of connection, because really with us they can be uncool. They don't really get a chance to be uncool in the lives out there as a teenager. In fact, that's the only currency they have out there. And so as parents, what we can do is we can just love them when they're uncool, and that allows them to... Anyway.
Whatever comes to the table, whatever they bring to the party.
Absolutely.
And I've always thought that if your kids are nice out there, and if they present themselves okay out there, but they're horrible in here at home, we are the lab.
Absolutely.
And they're experimenting with us. How far can I push?
Exactly.
Where's the line? How horrible can I be before she strikes back?
Exactly.
And I think they try it on with us at home. And we create that safe space in which for them to do it.
Exactly. That's why we can't take anything personally. They're just experimenting. They're like a mad scientist going, oh, I wonder what will happen if I say this to her now, you know. Oops, that was the wrong thing to say. And we have to show them that was a line crossed, you know, not show them the boundaries. We have to step in.
In fact, they do want to know where that boundary is, and sometimes they push until they get where the boundary is.
Exactly.
Because they are actually, in a way, trying to discover who they are. I mean, that's their journey. Who am I separate from you?
Absolutely.
And so they very often take the road less travelled and the one that you don't want them to take, precisely to be different from you.
And I think that's when you've raised a healthy teenager. I think if you've just got a law-abiding, rule-abiding teenager...
Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full,
exactly.
Sir.
Is that the kind of person that you're trying to raise in the world? You know, that person is probably going to end up having a midlife crisis when they're going to be the teenager when they're 45, because they never had a chance to do it when they were 17.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about brain development, because they really are in a very fluid stage.
Yes.
And they are really people of little brain, so to speak.
That's what I discovered. I mean, I really want to say that I'm not a parenting expert. Unlike you, honestly, I have no degrees. I just learned on the job, and I did a lot of research while I was writing the book. And I did do a lot of research on the teenage brain, and that was what was so interesting for me, to understand that there is a brain. Well, I call in my book, I call it the chapter "The Brain Behind the Mouth," because if you understand that the brain is not actually fully developed yet, then you can have a bit more compassion for what's coming out of the mouth.
You can, but it also means you have to understand why you cannot abdicate your parental responsibility either. And this is how it was explained to me. So if this is the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and in adults who've got a fully developed brain, it's closed. But in teenagers, right up until about the age of 25, that prefrontal cortex is open and it's closing very, very slowly. And this is where their executive function lies. This is where their thinking and reasoning is. And you talk about being the speed bumps to slow them down. And we have to do it because they're not thinking quite straight and they're impulsive.
Absolutely.
And to slow it down and have those very important conversations.
Yeah.
And I got that through your book, and I so believe that with all teens. Those conversations lay the foundation for everything. And it's that family bond, that family connection that is so truly, truly important. And the other thing that I picked up is about gut feel. If they can't fully use that brain, they're not fully safe in their brain, we've got to guide them somewhere else.
Absolutely. I just realized that it's for both of us, for them to trust their intuition, and for us as parents to trust our intuition as well. The same way that, you know, Dr. Spock said, you know more than you do when your children are little. It's the same with teenagers. If we're connected to them, we can often feel what's going on for them. We have a sense of what's going on for them.
So tuning in and not just listening to the words, but listening to the spaces between the words.
Absolutely.
Joanne, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, for sharing your really colourful insights as we journey to the ultimate goal of releasing our children into the world. And I'd love for you to end off by reading a few lines from your book, because you just have such a knack of getting things across.
Thank you, Nikki. So I'll read from our book now. We are scripted into their procreation. Their lives flow from us, but manifest as something separate. They come through us and they leave us too. The parenting earth on which we stand has a deep natural fault that breaks so that their continent can disconnect from ours and they can float away. They do not belong to us like an heirloom or a family farm. We can't tag them, brand them, have them valued, and expect them to increase our status or earn interest on our behalf. They belong to us in the mercurial way that our history belongs to us, like memory belongs to us.
Thank you, Joanne. It's been such a pleasure to meet you. The good news is that teens give us back ourselves little by little. It's an invitation to reinvent ourselves by asking the very same questions they are working on too. Who am I, and what do I want to be? For links to what was discussed on the show today and how to order Love in the Time of Contempt, visit nikkibush.com and click on the Nikki Bush TV tab. On that note, I dare you to go and change the world, one parent, one teacher, one leader at a time.